that I make. Poor spider, I will burn your home in order to escape. And when the darkness grows into my heavily loaded back, I'll shake it off my shoulders and I'll follow my own track.
I'm Jeff.
I'm Nick.
And together we are the Vagabonds. Today, as always, we are toasting with Toxic Masculinity Whiskey, the best rye whiskey in America. We also make a bourbon. You can check it out at www.toxicmasculinitywhiskey.com and order right from the website, and they'll ship it to you anywhere in the United States. We ship to most zip codes. Unfortunately, not all. There are a few states that have weird laws, but most zip codes, we can ship it right to your doorstep.
I might add that we also provide reasonably honest lawnmower repair and marriage counseling.
So today we have an interesting guest with an unusual background. We met him when he came out to our fantasy camp, which is covered in chapter 16 of Vagabonds, Tourists in the Heart of Darkness, about 22 years ago, huh? And when he was a producer for ABC's Good Morning America. But that's just one of the many things he's done. So we're going to turn it over to him. His name is Jeff Jayson. So there's two Jeffs here, which might get confusing, but we'll struggle through that. Jeff, tell us a little bit about, your multiple careers and how you got started and all that.
Jeff and Jeff, they handed out the J's that day, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, those 2 days were probably at least 10 years apart, but other than that.
Right. Well, I started off wanting to be a dentist and found out dental school was not where I wanted to be. So always had an interest in science and ended up with a science degree, but I actually wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. I wanted to just scuba dive around the world and be a marine biologist. So I got a degree in that, but found out I was much better at visual things like television. So ended up in broadcasting. And
weren't you a cop first before you became a broadcaster?
I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I tried to get into NYPD. They had the academy, and no sooner did I get in and go through the academy, and they said, this is in New York, they said there's going to be layoffs. I think if you can remember years ago when New York City went through the fiscal crisis, Ford to City, drop dead, that kind of stuff. That was years ago.
It's hard to imagine laying off cops these days.
What's that again?
Hard to imagine laying off cops these days. Now they're begging anybody and everybody to join.
Oh, yeah. Well, they were going through a fiscal crisis, and because it was civil service, it's last hired, first fired. So that didn't go very far. But I did have my minor in broadcasting and found out I was not too bad at it. So started off with a brief job in advertising and then went to a local radio station and was a reporter for years. Then I was a reporter at a local TV station in New York for years, and eventually ended up at Channel 7 Eyewitness News in New York doing, what did I do? Producing, writing, assignment desk. And I think I don't remember the year, but I do remember it was the Iran hostage crisis.
79.
Was it 79?
Yeah.
And they were brought home, and I ended up. I'm very good technically, so I ended up figuring out how to go live from where the hostages were and going live from West Point, and nobody else could figure out how to do it. So the network ended up hiring me, and I became sort of their live aficionado. I could get a broadcast out of pretty much anywhere that they sent me. So I ended up with a specialty overseas, basically covering wars, coups, insurrections, disasters, and things like that. And I think I went to 11 theaters because my father, who was in the Navy for 20 years, got me a ribbon for every war that I went to. And I think he ended up giving me a box, like a shadow box with 11 different ribbons. So I think I was in 11 wars on the front lines. Ended up going from the news side over to Good Morning America. And I still ended up covering, everything from, Beirut to Somalia, Black Hawk Down, the Gulf War, Desert Storm. I can't even begin to tell you all the different wars that I was in, but they figured, like, if you could go there and come back alive and get it on the air, that you were suddenly an expert. So after my first, I do remember the first overseas assignment I had. Years ago, Union Carbide released some chemical in Bhopal, India.
Yeah.
And there were like 3,000 people that died, and cows were dead. And they said, get on a plane, go to India, call us when you get there. I'm like, okay. And we had to go to Bhopal from Delhi every day because there was no way to go live out of Bhopal. There was no electric, no nothing. And things were not portable at the time. So ended up covering that. I remember I was a little bit scared at the time because 3,000 people just died and we were the first ones in, and we didn't know if we could hold our breath that long. But it ended up being dissipated and went back and forth for a couple of weeks, and did quite well covering that. And it was Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, I don't remember. I was in India and I was getting ready to go home. And I survived this. So suddenly I became an overseas expert. And I got at the time, they were called telexes. They didn't have texts and things like that. And
I remember telex.
And I still remember the telex. It was to Jeff Jayson, ABC News, Delhi, from Amcos, New York. Please proceed directly to Thailand, drive to the Cambodian border, meet the Khmer Rouge, and cover the war between the NVA and the Khmer Rouge. So I ended up in Cambodia, and that whole thing went into, I'm just drawing a blank. What was the movie they did where they were all living on the Thai border and from Cambodia?
You mean the refugee camps?
Yeah.
The movie about the refugee camps?
Yeah, but there was a movie.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I remember, but I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, me neither.
I'll think of it. But anyway, it was strange because this was after, seeing Marlon Brando and the Khmer Rouge. And they were not the friendliest people on earth. And suddenly I was entrusting my life to them. So we would meet these crazies from the Khmer Rouge, and they would take us into the little villages, and they'd say, okay, get your pictures because the Vietnamese are going to be bombing that or whatever tonight. And we'd go back and everything would be bombed, and the refugees would be going, into Thailand at the time. And it was during the monsoon season, and it was like clockwork. We knew that, it was going to be incoming fire for the longest time until the rain started, and then everything just went silent.
Killing fields.
The killing fields. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. And then everything would go silent, and the rains would come, and then the next morning it would clear for a couple of hours. The firefighting would start, and it would go on until the rain came, and then they would stop and start again the next day. So that was rather interesting. Then they ended up sending me to Beirut, and if you recall, the TWA hijacking, where they had the captain in this TWA plane, I think his name was Captain Testrake, and he had his head sticking out of the window with a gun pointed to it. That was my stuff. Yeah. So I ended up doing that. And it was crazy because we were there with the terrorists, and they would hold a news conference. We'd ask a couple of questions, and then they would take the AK-47s and start blowing the ceiling out of the room we were in. And that meant you were done asking questions.
Sounds like a good Saturday night.
Shut up. I guess they didn't speak English. I don't know. So, then I ended up, covering, everything in the Philippines that went on with Marcos. And I still have one of her bras in her shoes, which I got out of the palace. And it was an interesting story at the time because
he's twisted.
What was it? What was that again?
I said you're twisted.
Hey,
he means that as a compliment.
She was gone. He was gone.
Compliment.
Ferdinand was gone. I think Boom Boom or Bam Bam, whatever his name was the only one left at the time. But anyway, I still remember they were storming the palace, and I was there with Ted Koppel, and the whole city was just in turmoil. There were fires everywhere. They were storming the palace. Paintings were flying out of the window. There was riots and everything in downtown Manila. And I was with Ted, and all of a sudden, all the people in the Philippines started pointing. It was Ted Koppel. They go, look, it's Ted Koppel. And everything just came to a standstill because of the armed forces. They were able to get ABC, so they knew who Ted Koppel was. So the revolution came to a standstill when Koppel got there. So that was kind of fun.
Anderson Cooper hopes the same thing happens when he shows up in town.
Yeah, good luck. Okay.
Not a chance.
Oh, look, it's Anderson who?
Yeah.
And I don't know. There was just so many different conflicts that I was in. The Gulf War was kind of interesting. Some stuff that happened in the Gulf War. If you recall, in Desert Storm, every night they would show live feeds from Saudi Arabia, and you'd see those blue domes in the background of all.
Yeah.
You mean the roofs of the
hotel, the Sheraton?
Yes, I was there.
Okay, well, everybody thought those were like missile silos or something. Yeah. They were just cabanas for the swimming pool. So
I thought the same thing before I got there, and I was so disappointed.
I know. Well, and I remember at that hotel, there was a lot of incoming Scuds and things like that. And one day they shot a Patriot up to intercept a Scud that was heading for the hotel. And then half of the Patriot missile was laying out in the yard at the hotel. So we carried the thing in, like three of us, and put it in the lobby and stood it up on end. And everybody who worked at the hotel covering that during that time signed it. So we had this Patriot missile that everybody signed standing up in the hotel. And when we went into Kuwait, we're out in the killing fields, and that was crazy. But the Kuwaitis were really happy that we were there, and they, by association, we were there with the military, and they couldn't do enough for us. So there was a family that was really
wore off real quick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh yeah.
Yeah, that had a shorter half-life than plutonium, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, that didn't last, but it lasted for a couple of minutes. And there was a family called the Marafis. And I remember they owned the hotel we were in. They owned the two hotels down the street. They owned everything. And I made friends with the guy, and he says, can we bring dinner for you? And can we bring liquor for you? Well, you can't get liquor in Kuwait. And the place just got bombed out. And I said, sure. He says, well, what do you want? I said, I don't know, whatever you can. At this point, we were eating like, spam and canned food. And he says, you want a steak dinner and some scotch? I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay. So I told everybody at ABC who was staying in the hotel, I said, don't eat the canned food. I said, I'm having a steak dinner catered with some scotch. And they're like, yeah, right. And they were threatening me that if I was bullshitting about it,
they were going to kill you.
The end of it, my street cred.
Tossing you out the roof.
Yeah, exactly. And sure enough, just like he said, at 7:00, in come these guys, holding these big platters up like this, steaming, stacked with steaks, and other people carrying bottles of liquor, and everybody just said, like, who are you? And then the next night we had shrimp and so forth. There was an interesting thing about.
Did you check the steaks for whip marks?
Were you in the International Hotel?
I believe it was.
The one that was right next to the embassy that used to be a Hilton.
Yeah,
because I was in the lobby of that hotel every evening for about 2 months after the war.
Well, I guess you missed the steak dinner, didn't you?
5 days after the liberation and going for. We must have crossed paths. And were you at Schwarzkopf's final briefing at the hotel down in Duran?
No,
Oh,
I
because
didn't get that.
I was there, and I thought maybe we were in the same room at the same. That's crazy. Wow.
It was interesting because before the Gulf War, the Desert Storm started. I was in LA. I was in LA. I just happened to be doing another story, and I was there when OJ happened, and OJ went down the opposite way on I-4 and the
Whoa.
interstate and stuff like that. So I went back to go. That was a whole other story, but he was there, and I saw that, and then I went back to do some follow-up stuff, and I was there covering something about that in LA. And I get a phone call from New York, and they said, "Can you get on the next flight, please? Go directly to Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf War is going to start in like 20 minutes." Because everybody was on the ground, we knew what was going on. So I was on the rooftop of a hotel in LA, and I said to the people at the pool who had something on television by the bar, I said, "Do you mind if I change the channel? I want to put CNN on," because they were leading the coverage at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, "Can I put CNN on? The war is going to start in like 20 minutes. And they go, "Yeah, right." And I said, "Just, do you mind?" So I put the thing on. 20 minutes later, the incoming rockets and missiles, whatever, everything started coming in, and they just looked at me like I had three heads. It's like, "Who the hell are you?" And I said, "Excuse me, I got to get on a plane." And then I ended up going there for God knows how long. Somalia was interesting. We tried to get into Somalia. Mogadishu was pretty much shut down. So we went to Nairobi, and we tried to figure out how to get in. There were obviously no commercial flights. So there was a drug that they were all doing over there called KAHT, K-A-H-T. It was like cocaine.
You know, they grow that plant in Laguna, California as a decorative shrub. Really,
oh, man, they're missing,
some landscaper put
they're
it
missing
in
their calling.
Yeah, it's an amphetamine.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And they would take that, in the morning and get completely zonked out on it, and then they would crash in the afternoon, and the gunfire would start. So we tried to figure out like how to get there. And I went over there with a very good friend of mine. She was a correspondent for ABC at the time. Her name was Denise Richardson. She was this Black woman from the Bronx. And, that I'm telling you that because there's a whole story that goes along with it. But anyway, I got Denise to get on a KAHT plane. Every day they would fly KAHT from Nairobi into Mogadishu on a drug smuggling plane. So we rode on the bales of KAHT in the back. We paid the guy whatever he wanted. It was cheaper than commercial, I know that. And as we're flying there, he says, "Well, we have to fly below the radar or they'll shoot us down. And we have to stay high enough above the water because they're the world's most shark-infested waters." And I'm like, "Okay, great." So we ended up landing in Mogadishu, and they had these, well, they're called technicals, but they were like war wagons. They had a 50 cal on the back and a couple of guys with AKs on the running boards. And you could buy one, or you had to buy one for the day. If you wanted to go anywhere, it was like $180. It was a really good deal. And wherever you wanted to go, you would just ride in these technicals around Mogadishu. So we're there, and again, Ted Koppel was there. I was there with Denise. And at one point, they said to us, I think it was the Marines, or maybe it was the Navy PIO. They said that the Navy SEALs were going to be coming onto the beach at such and such a time at night. And if you want to get shots, this is where they're going to go. And so there were a bunch of us that went there.
Yeah.
And they told everybody but the SEALs that were landing. So they landed, and all the TV lights went on. And like the next thing I knew, I had an M16 pointed at my head like this in the sand. And it's like, "Who are you?" I'm an American. I'm an American. So it was like hard to explain, but that's what the PIO sent us out to do. So we did it, and we ended up almost dying for it. So that was fun. And then everything was like crazy. We basically got into Mogadishu. We're looking for different stories, and as soon as the Marines and the Navy landed, the whole financial system collapsed. And if you guys have been overseas a lot and you don't know what to call their currency, we call them gugus. They were just, like it's 30 gugus, whatever country you in, it was a gugu. So anyway, we decided to find out how worthless their currency was. So we drove with a driver going on the other side of the green line, which is at that point, not under control of anything. And we were going to do a money exchange. So we basically had a pickup truck full of gugus that we could buy for like a few thousand American dollars or something. I don't know why we did it, but we did it. And the next thing we knew, we were told to go upstairs in an apartment on the second floor and wait here. And then they were going to do the exchange. And then the guy came back and he says, they're not going to do the exchange. And there's two guys waiting downstairs and they're going to shoot you as soon as you walk out, take your money and take your cameras. So at this point, I'm like, okay, we're pretty screwed, because there was a window or two and there was one door out and there was really no way of like getting out of there. And I couldn't figure out how we were going to get out of the situation. And I realized the only thing we had was money. So I somehow managed to get the money to our guy to go buy a couple other guys with guns. And we heard a couple of gunshots. The guys were like no longer there and we got out. So I guess we owe those guys or whatever. I didn't see it, but that's what we paid them to do.
All 5 of them were around the corner dividing up the cash.
Yeah.
Or that, we heard the gunshots and they said it's okay. So whatever I did, it worked, and they got their money. We got out with our lives, and that was fun. And then, of course, there was Black Hawk Down and all the other crazy stuff. But the interesting thing was getting back to what I was saying about Denise Richardson. She never left the Bronx, and here she is. She's flying to Africa with me, and she started getting into the whole thing. Oh, I'm going back to my homeland. I'm into this. And I'm like, okay, this is great. So we get there, and she wanted me to go to the market with her because she was starting to get homesick. She said, can we go and buy something that would remind me of something at home? And I said, okay, what would you like? She said, like a Coke. I said, they don't have Coke. So we go to the market, and she goes, how about a watermelon? I said, Denise, we're in deepest, darkest Africa. I'm not asking for a friggin' watermelon. so she goes, yeah, you're right. So she ended up buying it anyhow. And we get back to the hotel, and we did pick up some meat at the market that were probably full of blowflies and things like that. But we were cooking it up, and Ted Koppel was there, and Ted says, yeah, if you just cook it long enough, nothing's going to hurt you. So we ate it, we lived. And then Denise says, I have a surprise for you. Oh, and by the way, I had to negotiate for this watermelon. It wasn't like, here's 10 gugus. The guy said, I want 20. I said, I'll give you 10. The next thing I know, he pulls a knife out, like half the length of a machete, and he goes, 20 gugus. I said, okay, 20. So I give him the money.
He has
we
our
get the watermelon. We go back, and we eat the dinner, and it was pretty good. And then Denise says to Ted, I have a really special thing for dessert. She goes downstairs and she brings slices of watermelon upstairs, and she hands it to Ted. She hands it to me, and she puts one in front of her. Ted looks at the watermelon. He looks up at Denise. He looks at the watermelon. He looks up at Denise, and he says, like only Ted Koppel could say, have you no ethnic pride? It was just a classic moment.
Have you got no one?
Ethnic pride.
God.
It was priceless. So, there were some just endless stories like this. I could probably go on and on and on. But I found my comfort zone being overseas in the middle of these conflicts more so than covering, politics, even though I did get on the campaign trail with Clinton and a few other people. There was just way too many things to remember. Every time there was a disaster, an earthquake, a flood, a hurricane, I usually got sent out, mostly because I was able to figure out how to get out live, which was kind of difficult to do under third world conditions and at a time when the technology wasn't there. And I still remember they sent us to Vietnam for the first live broadcast out of Vietnam. And there are a couple of interesting things that went on there. If you recall, it was all under the control of the North Vietnamese and by proxy, the Russians. And we wanted to go live, and they said, well, use our satellite. It was a big C-band dish, which is the size of a house. And they said, if you use our C-band, uplink, we'll make sure you get on the air. And they called it Lotus 2 or something like that. And we kept saying, okay, well, it'll be ready in time for the anniversary of the end of the War of Vietnam. Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. So it's like down to the wire. I'm drinking vodka with the engineers, not speaking a word of Russian. They're not speaking any English, but the vodka was the great equalizer. They gave me Russian vodka. I gave them scotch. Everything was good. And the next day, we were not ready to go on the air. NBC said, we're not going to trust the Russians to get on the air. They brought a satellite dish in, flew it in, and parked it in front of the palace. So to save face, the Vietnamese were not going to let them get on the air before us because we were using their uplink. So they went over, and as dumb as they are, they're just as smart. And they said, you have to move your satellite dish over here. And they basically put NBC under it. They threw CBS out of the country, but that's another story. And they told NBC to park their dish in such and such a place in front of the palace, which was directly under a giant tree, and they couldn't hit the satellite. And they wouldn't let them move it until we got on the air. So we had the first live broadcast out of Vietnam, and after we got on there, they let them move the satellite dish, and then they got on. But when we were getting ready to go on the air, I think it was Steve Bell who used to do Good Morning America at the time. And Steve Bell was standing there. He was standing in front of the lights, and we were at the Duck Lop Hotel, which was I don't know what it's called now, but it was right across from that shot at the embassy with the square thing on the roof that the helicopter landed on. Everybody was about. That was our backdrop. So we're getting ready to go on the air. We're literally 20 seconds to air. And we look to the right, and we see a rat starting to walk into the shot, the size of a German Shepherd. And do we say
a small one?
Yeah, he was. It was a puppy. So we were trying to figure out, like, do we say something and freak the guy out? 10 seconds to air now, the first live broadcast out of Vietnam, or shut up and hope for the best. So we shut up, and the rat walks in front of him. He doesn't really see it, or off to the side of him. And the shot is nothing there. And you see a rat coming up and go down like that.
Wow.
And if you ever pulled the footage, you'd see that rat and know that we never told them. So everything went off without a hitch. And I mean, I don't know. There are just so many stories. Everywhere I went, there was a story.
Your experiences in that sound like a mirror image of what we call the Special Forces Commo Man.
Yeah.
The kind of people that use a rusty bed spring as an antenna reflector so they can pick up HBO illegally.
Yeah.
Show it on their TV downstairs. Yeah, those guys.
Actually,
propagation.
That's not far from the truth, because when we were in Beirut, we couldn't go live out of Beirut, and we were in Cyprus, in Larnaca, which was right on the beach. And CBS basically bought everything. They bought all the uplinks, basically boxed us out of getting on the air. And our only hope was to get a link going into Nicosia, which was, quite a ways away. So we basically had to do a microwave hop going from down on the beach or near the water, near the airport, where they were bringing in all the tape that had to be fed for the day. And that tape then got put into a tape deck, fed into the microwave, and then it did a double hop on microwave going up the mountain and then all the way into Nicosia to the uplink, which we were able to get on. But we didn't have the microwave equipment, so we had to get on one of our private jet. And then we had to fly into Tel Aviv, kind of pilfer through the Tel Aviv bureau, get any microwave stuff we could find, and literally hike up the mountain with all those microwaves on our back and try to set up a link. So we ended up doing that. And it was also interesting in Beirut because we had hired locals there, and NBC and CBS basically said, no, we're going to do this ourselves. So there was a guy who was like sort of the contact there. He was like the big whatever, and his name was Nabi Berry. I don't know if you recall that
Nabi Berry?
Yeah, Nabi Berry. He was like the big, he had these big glasses and he looked like Morty Seinfeld. It was interesting. And so anyway, we played nice with them, and kind of like we did with the Vietnamese, and we were able to get access to a lot of stuff during that hijacking. And CBS, was trying to like get us out of getting any uplinks, and NBC was just floundering at the time. And
I'm shocked. I tell you, I'm shocked.
You're shocked. Yeah, so are we. So we were like the third string, but we were climbing up mountains with microwaves on our back and doing anything we could to just try to make it happen. So they came over to us and they said, be at such and such a hotel at such and such a time. And they had all the hostages from the TWA plane at that hotel. And we were the only ones there because they wouldn't tell anyone else. So we had all the footage. Nobody else had anything, but it was.
Don't they call that a scoop?
Yeah,
that was a scoop, but the stipulation was that it was pool footage, and we had to share it. So, we did, but since we had to do what we had to do, we made sure that we got it to our Rome bureau and got it on the evening news, and then fed it to New York for CBS and NBC. So we beat the pants off of them. We had everybody. And
oops, I hit the wrong button.
You did.
That would have been
the one that said "Don't touch this." Is that
I was the one that I got to send it to him on time? Oops, I hit the wrong button.
And gosh, there was something else it was another funny story, but I can't think of what it is, I'm sure. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. I kind of found my element there. I found out that overseas a smile goes a long way. Instead of coming in and trying to be pushy, you just smile and nod, and you could get whatever you wanted. And
a gun. You get more with a smile and a gun.
During the Gulf War, or during Desert Storm, I had there were a couple of things, actually. I went out to our Toyota, which was covered with oil from the oil fields, just like all black. And I looked under it, and there was something sticking out, and it was a loaded AK-47. So I kept that with me the whole time in the Jeep and wherever we went. So I had at least a fighting chance of doing whatever it was we had to do. And one day we parked to go get some food, and our truck was gone. We couldn't find it anywhere. And it ended up being like 6 blocks away in another parking spot. Apparently they were moving cars for some reason. They just put it where they wanted and left it. Just like crazy over there, all kinds of crazy stuff. Mount St. Helens, a lot of local stuff. We were down in Mexico when they had the big earthquake down there. Yeah. And I was with John Quinones, who you've probably seen him on What Would You Do.
I think he's the one that you brought to the fantasy.
Your audio broke up. What's that?
I said, I think he was the one that came with you to the fantasy camp.
No, that was Don Daler.
But at some point, Quinones was there. I don't know if he wasn't with you. He'd already moved somewhere else because I definitely remember talking to him.
You may have met him on another story. I don't know. Maybe he's the one that did when we put the plane in the studio. I don't know.
No, when the plane in the studio, that was Diane.
Okay.
She didn't like me. Thought I was sexist.
Just a lot of that.
But I get a lot of that.
So. Wait till she gets a load of your whiskey. Anyway, Jonas and I always had a good time together, and we always looked for the party wherever we were, because we had covered all the wars down in Nicaragua and Central America, Salvador, and all that. But we always managed to have a good time. Like we went to Haiti, and I think there was an earthquake, if I remember correctly. Is that what happened? There was an earthquake, and
yeah, we were there.
They were pretty messed up there, and we were in Port-au-Prince for as long as we could take it, and then John and I said there has to be something on the countryside, so we go out and we wanted to see if the Club Med was still open. Imagine that. So we drove out to the Club Med, and all the guests had left, and the only people left were the GOs, who were like starving to party. So we ended up, covering that for 2 days and had a great time. And they told us a story, which ended up being a movie. There was a man, his daughter, and his daughter's friend, I believe, that did not want to wait to be evacuated. So what they did was hire a private pilot to get them out of Haiti. And the plane ended up crashing out in the ocean. They ended up floating on the debris for 10 days. Don't remember the name of the movie, but I think the girl, the daughter's friend died, and the father may or may not have died, and she ended up living. So it was a movie about 10 days of survival at sea. So we kind of fell into that.
We were the ones who pulled the last living survivor out of the rectory across from the main cathedral. And
in Haiti?
Yeah, it was a 62-year-old woman. We had a special machine that basically can locate 1 milliamp, 1 millivolt electromagnetic field around a beating heart.
Oh, wow.
No false positive. Thing works great. It goes through 70, 80 feet of rubble and still can find it. So we had rolled up on there, and we had 3 heartbeats when we got there. And it was about 11 in the morning.
Yeah. Okay.
And they dug from both sides, the Germans on one side and the Mexicans on this side. And then later the Poles came in and dug. And they, I screwed myself on this because I got all big guys that are bigger than me because I was going to Haiti. And it turns out I'm the only one that fit down the hole that they dug down into. Well, it's only big enough for that stretcher. Well, all these mooses won't fit down there. So I ended up having to go down. So we got down. We found the woman, actually located her because she was singing spirituals.
I'd be singing spiritual too.
She's been there, what, 8 days?
Yeah, 7 days. 7 days. She'd survived because she was in the women's john, and there was one of the toilets that had water in it, and she was able. We found the archbishop, and he was still warm to the touch, and he'd been drinking his urine because he had all kinds of uric acid or uric crystals around his mouth.
He was alive when we located him, but dead when they finally got the tunnel
down. Yeah.
So
make a note, Hurricane Andrew, and I'll come back to that after we finish this up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was crazy. Well, and we were there for one of the many coups that they had, and I remember we were in front of the palace, and the Tonton Macoute was there, and I was standing next to a whole bunch of people out there. My cameraman, sound man at the time, and I look at the guy next to me. He's there 1 minute and gone the next, and he's got a bullet between his eyes, and he's on the ground next to me. Later on that day, my sound man caught a bullet in his deck, and it's just, the whole thing, it was like nuts. Couldn't wait to get out of there. But we did have fun at Club Med. But getting back to Mexico, again with Quinones, doing exactly what you guys were saying. They would go silencio and listen for any kind of movement or any kind of anybody talking and trying to pull people out of the rubble. I bet if they had one of those heartbeat detectors, that would have been a miracle.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they did at the time. But I said to John, we got to get out of Mexico City. This place is a dump. So he's like, yep. And I said, what do you say we go to Acapulco and see how they fared? Of course, nothing happened in Acapulco, but the city was empty because everybody thought Mexico was like Loma Linda or something. And we got to Acapulco, and they were so happy that we were doing a story promoting tourism that they gave us a suite at the Acapulco Princess. They said the mayor sent his limo and his private bodyguard to take us all out at night to the nightclubs and shoot the fact that the city was open. The cliff divers gave us a show. So we had the key to the city for a day or two in Acapulco, trying to show that it was alive and well and tourists should come down. So we had a lot of
Can you
fun.
imagine that? They wasted all that on reporters. And we go someplace, they give you a can of beans and have to stay away from the sheep.
We used to hate you guys
Oh,
because every time we went somewhere that was newsworthy, like Bosnia in 1995, the press had driven up the cost of everything. If you went there when it wasn't particularly newsworthy, everything was 1/10 the cost of what it was after the press arrived.
I know.
And it used to drive me crazy.
First thing they do is make a leaflet drop.
We were in Split, Croatia during the war in Bosnia, trying to get to Sarajevo.
Right.
The armored car was renting for $2,500 a day. And nobody could afford them but CNN. We took the bus, which was a whole exciting adventure in itself. But
you picked the wrong profession. What can I tell you?
Prices like crazy.
Yeah, that happened a lot. They gouged us, but we just had the expense account, so we just did what we had to do, and that was that.
Yeah, well, they gouged us, and we didn't have the expense.
When we went to Haiti, we had an expense account.
Well,
they gave us the Black American Express card to the chief counsel.
Yeah.
And we made him sorry.
But there was I was going to circle back to Hurricane Andrew, which was kind of interesting at the time because we knew the hurricane was going to hit, and they did send us out for a day or so in advance if a hurricane was going to hit, and we'd cover it. And the typical standing in the wind like this with the microphone, whatever. And we got down there, and we were in Miami at our bureau, and it was bad. It hit, and Miami got hit. There were boats in the middle of Bayshore, on South Beach and things like that. But then they said, now it's going to New Orleans. Get on a plane and go to New Orleans. So we hop on a plane, go to New Orleans. It hit. It wasn't that bad. And they said, get back to Miami. You won't believe how bad it is south of the city. Well, all communication had been cut off south of the city where it really hit. And we got down there, and it was just, I live in Naples, so I went through Ian, and it was pretty bad here, but Andrew was just completely, it was like an atomic bomb went off everywhere we went. And we got down there, and we didn't even know, you could walk down 100 feet and do a story. And anywhere you went, there was a story. And I remember one of the first ones that we ran across, there was a family that had somehow survived. They were in their house when the hurricane hit. If I remember this correctly, they were staying in their house because nobody really was told to evacuate except for the very, very last minute. So they get in their house, and suddenly the house all around them is getting ripped apart. A bedroom, a living room, and walls are flying off. And they're kind of forced to the center of the house, and they ended up in a bathroom in the center of the house. And they had 4 people total in the family. They were huddled in this bathroom, and the father was holding onto a doorknob like this, let me see if I can do it better, holding onto the doorknob of the bathroom like this. And he knew that if he let go during the hurricane, the door would fly out and they would all be killed. So he sat there for whatever it was, hour and a half, 2 hours, until the hurricane finally passed and they survived. And then he goes, oh, duh, we're only in the eye. So he had to do it all over again. Yeah. So they took us, at their house where they all sat in the bathroom. And we would just, walk down the street and say to somebody, so what happened? And we'd hear stories like this. The rest of this is for Good Morning America. And the one thing about Good Morning America was we had always done people-oriented stories as opposed to hard news. So World News Tonight had sent their crews down, and they would start getting marching orders from the morning meeting. Oh, FEMA's holding a news conference. Oh, the governor's holding a news conference. Oh, the senator's holding a news conference. Who gives a shit? You know, we were just like talking to people.
To people that just got blown out of their house.
Right. So we would do stories like this every day. And then everybody that was down there covering the news for World News Tonight would just get, torn apart in the morning meeting. How come Good Morning America had this story? How come they had the story about the animals that are running around from the zoo? How come this? And well, you told us to cover FEMA. You told us to follow the senator. I know, but and so that was kind of like the beginning where you could start seeing, things were just kind of weird because all they cared about was what they had to say from Washington as opposed to what people had to say in the street. And it was kind of the beginning in my mind of how things were starting to get covered. And then, moving fast forward, I was at ABC for a long time, and I left there. I worked on a bunch of other stuff. I did reality shows with Paris Hilton, and for 10 years, I did the New Year's Rockin' Eve with Ryan Seacrest and with Dick Clark. So I was one of the people producing that. And then eventually I ended up working on a couple of other shows, Inside Edition, a couple of shows, and then at CBS, which I hated. It was the morning show there. And they were just like, that was about the time that Obama got into office. And you could start seeing how people's personal politics were really dictating the coverage.
Yeah.
It was no longer going out and committing an act of journalism. In other words, covering a story. It was like, oh, let's do a story on the muscles that Michelle Obama has in her arm. Like, who cares? But that's
I'd
what
be more interested in the Adam level.
Yeah, we have to do something on the big muscle she has in her arms. I'm like, okay, whatever. It's not my show. Do whatever you want. And now I remember one time we were doing some sort of controversial thing, and they said, can you book a guest, from the right to come on and talk to this person from the Obama administration or something. And I had booked Laura Ingraham, who didn't have her own show or anything at the time, but she was just starting out. And I remember talking to her, and I said, oh, man, I love watching you. I'm a big fan. She goes, I cannot believe I'm having a conversation like this with somebody from CBS. I said, yeah, there's one or two of us.
Yeah.
And then you started seeing how the coverage was starting to be very, very much directed in terms of.
Did he just look over his shoulder?
Yeah,
when he said that,
somebody's trying to break in,
telling one of those off-color jokes.
No, I know who it is. So it was Michelle Obama. So you started seeing little hints of how the coverage was starting to be slanted and changed, and very, very much going towards the left and not so much the center. Because if, I don't have to tell anybody, but especially you guys, if you see a story now, it's because somebody tweeted something and suddenly it's gospel. And, I don't have to give you a laundry list of all the things that ended up not being true. But if somebody had a scoop at the time, like earlier on before it became as slanted as it did, not only did the producer of the show, the executive producer, say, okay, I need 2 sources to verify, 3 sources to verify. And once it's verified, then it had to get run up the ladder and go to legal and make sure that everything was up and up. And of course, nothing's vetted now. It just goes on the air. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's a lie, it's a lie. And you're lucky if you see a retraction.
Yeah, they won't even apologize. Right. After the whole world finds out they were lying. They just go on to the next one.
We have a friend of ours that gets into LGBTQ chat rooms and stirs them up, and then changes his name and goes back in again. They've got a contract out for him. Yeah. He's not exactly what you would call politically correct.
No,
No.
none of
Oh,
us
well.
are, but he's exceptionally.
Exceptional.
Well, anyway, I am surprised that our paths crossed as often as they did before we knew each other, because we
I am
never
too.
really sat down and talked about it.
Oh, so what do you have? Newfound respect for me?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Why? Because I got shot at, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Desert Storm, Haiti. Wow.
everything. Yeah. I mean, there were so many more. I just don't remember them all. There were so many. But yeah.
But then how did you wind up in Tucson covering a half-assed fantasy camp?
Well, if you think about the fantasy camp.
You lost a bet, right?
Yeah, it was like terrorist, evasive driving, all kinds of, terrorist scenarios and stuff like that. I think part of it, and I was that before or after 9/11?
It was before, because we shut it down.
Okay.
So it was in like 1999.
Okay. But there was some terrorist activity, and it was sort of like it kind of tied into things that were going on at the time. Now it would be so politically incorrect, it wouldn't even be funny. But anyway, that was a lot of fun, and people liked watching things like that, with the simunition and.
Look at have you seen this thing called Special Forces?
Yeah, there's a new show out.
Got a bunch of celebrities that are supposedly taking the same selection course, phase 1, where they drown you, blow you up, make you march forever, and feed you camel steaks. Supposedly they're going through that, but now one of the instructors is actually former Special Forces, and B, there ain't no way they're suffering like we suffered.
No. It's like Survivor. When you watch that, you know that there's like a whole hotel, like, half a mile away.
Yeah, the hot showers, clean sheets, and a bar. Yeah,
especially celebrities.
I might have pulled my pecs. Give me another gin and tonic.
Well, it's like I've done a few of the home improvement shows, and it looks like the host is rebuilding the whole house, and they'll say, "Okay, can you come in and hold a hammer here and take a couple of hammer strikes, and then hold this saw, drill this or whatever," and somebody else puts it together. So it's the same thing.
It was like that Bush family in Alaska. There was a major town less than 2 miles away from where that camp was.
Right.
Well, there's nothing less real than a reality show.
Please.
Well, didn't you guys try and pitch a reality show?
Well, we tried to pitch a show about loosely based on the fantasy camp.
Well, you know what happened? There's an interesting story about that. What's the show that's on? It's still on right now. It's like
The Great Race.
The Great Race. It was basically The Great Race. It wasn't as refined, but it was The Great Race. And we had pitched it, and they wanted to give us like a pittance of money at ABC at the time. And we didn't want to accept. It was like a few $100s or something. We said, no, we're not going to sell this idea for a few $100s. Well, The Great Race also pitched it. It was basically, the same show. And we were going to sue The Great Race because they took it became a whole big deal that I didn't want to get into. But basically, it was our idea. And ABC ended up going with The Great Race.
Yeah.
But we had but we had the same idea. Just at one point it wasn't worth pursuing anymore because it would have dragged on for years and cost a fortune. But basically that was our idea, and we had pitched it before they did.
Yeah, so, I remember that. I'll never forget the pitch meeting. The Asian woman and her little assistant there. Yeah, the little assistant was just a Twitter with the idea. He loved it. And she was pretty cold. I don't know what she thought. I could never read.
Well, Asian women normally are cold.
Yeah, I just don't remember. I do remember pitching it, and then The Great Race was going to air, and I called the head of The Great Race, and I said, "You just took our idea. There's going to be some court issues over this." So anyway, it got really complicated, and just moved on because you know, whatever I would have gotten, it wouldn't have paid for what it would have cost to get.
Did at any time during when it got difficult, did she reach under her desk and push a button and two Brunos showed up and escorted you down?
No, they actually.
It wasn't like that, because my beef was really with the producers of The Great Race.
Oh, wow.
Okay, it wasn't ABC who bought it. It was them. It was those people that took our idea, and we had copyrighted it, and they ran with it, and it's a long story, but
yeah, and they know that
that's not unusual.
That
happens all the time when you pitch an idea.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can't really copyright an idea.
I've been waiting for 2 years for this group that has the option on my first 2 books to make it into a movie. You know, I've gotten to the point when they call, I just go, wonder what the excuse is this time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what everybody who has an idea for a movie or a television show, that's just par for the course. And technically you can't copyright an idea. All they have to do is make it slightly different, and, you know, and it's 5%. Not your idea anymore.
Yeah.
So, but that's all water under the bridge. But at least I knew that at the time we were on the right track. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Well, so, unless you make it something truly twisted and evil, like A Man That Lives Alone and still owns one of Imelda Marcus's pair of shoes.
And it was a Manzier, actually. I think it belonged. It was a Manzier. I think it belonged to Ferdinand.
Manzier. Oh, you mean a bro?
A bro, yeah, and it belonged to Ferdinand.
Oh, cool.
Actually,
remember General Bear? Yeah, he was another jokester like that.
Yeah. So anyway, everything started changing quite a bit, and it wasn't just the politics. It was the way things were done. We used to go as a group, and then they would send a producer out with a handheld camera, and they would cover the whole thing. And, you know, the glory was gone. The glitter was gone. And I eventually got out of it. And I always wanted to do police work because I liked it in the very beginning. And like during 9/11, I was down there when everything was coming down, and at the same time I was working as a volunteer with the sheriff's department. So I'd go in for the sheriff's department at night and pull body parts out, and then during the day cover all the stuff that had to be covered in the morning at 9/11. Then they sent me to Bahrain on a flight, and then took a cod and landed on an aircraft carrier and ended up in the USS Roosevelt doing the sorties day and night. And you know, it sort of was a little crazy. Then you know, when I kind of took my pension from ABC, I did what I wanted to do. I moved. I had a second house up in Woodstock, New York, and lived up there. And I would still work freelance in the city, but I got in the fire department there, became an EMT, and I saw a thing in the paper where the local police department was trying to put together an auxiliary or a reserve force. And I went in to talk to the police chief, and I said, I wouldn't mind doing that. And he said, well, what's your experience? And I told him, and he says, well, I'd like to just put you on staff and have you run the program for me. And I said, okay, I can do that. And he says, but you have to go back to the academy. So I ended up being the oldest graduate of the police academy in New York State ever, and got through with flying colors.
Yeah. The black market pharmacy was supplying the steroids got to his knee and his back. Yeah.
So, that was a lot of fun, because I still do the Spartan races. I don't know if you know what they are.
Every time I see a Facebook post from you,
well, sorry,
you're like running a marathon naked or crawling 2 miles through a mud pit or some goddamn thing.
Yeah. You live in Tucson?
No, he lives in Florida.
Oh, thank God there's a continent between us. Those guys that come out, come on. Yeah, you need to get in shape. Go with me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I still do those. I just did a 13-mile Spartan race about a month ago. And the hardest part about that, and I don't know if I'll do it again, is not the 13 miles, but you had to walk in swamp up to your chest. And that was for like a mile. And it was horrible. I was just tangled up in weeds and I couldn't move. And I said, okay, so if I get a heart attack here, there's not even going to be a way to rescue me. It was just, that was hard. I can deal with the mountains, but that swamp up to my chest for a mile was just horrible. And,
how old are you now, Jeff?
73.
Jesus Christ.
Well, that explains everything. He's just a fucking kid.
Yeah.
No, it means I'm senile and I have dementia. So anyway, I have been doing that for like 10 years. So because I kind of trained for those, doing whatever the PT was in the academy was really not that difficult. I actually kind of look forward to it. And if you, like any academy, the drill instructors were there and they would say, okay, pull your equipment out of your bag or have an inspection. If somebody did something wrong, then everybody was punished. And they would say, okay, on the deck. And everybody would have to get down and do planks. And that's the one thing I'm actually not bad at. I could hold a 5-minute plank. And so I went down there and they had kids that were like, what's that?
We know somebody.
We call them.
We call them hello dollies and flutter kicks.
Yeah.
You have to be. Your heels have to be 6 inches off the ground. We actually know a guy that's built in such a way when he lays down on his back, his feet coming up where he's 6 inches off the ground.
Oh no, this is the other way. This is face down. This is where you have to like put your elbows down and bridge up off the deck.
Okay.
So and my core is pretty good. That's the one thing. Everybody has something that their body's good at. My core is pretty strong, and I would get down and they'd say on the deck, and everybody had to plank, and I could do 5 minutes, and they would get to 30 seconds. They were like 22 years old, and they would start sweating and collapsing, and the drill instructors would be like, "Get the fuck off my deck! How come Grandpa over here isn't even breaking a sweat, and you're like dropping like flies?" So it was kind of fun. And then I found out after the fact that
just remember, don't go in the bathroom alone.
Yeah, right. And they told me after the fact, they said, when you got into this thing, we looked at you and we said, we didn't know whether to call you sir, or to just, beat you up like everybody else. I said, it really didn't matter. So I'm good friends with those people now. And I went back to the academy to give some
remember, respect is earned.
Yes.
Always earned. That's a good way to do it. Show them that you can do it as much as they can and longer.
Yeah. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. And then I started doing that. And then I couldn't take New York anymore. We moved down here to Florida, and it's been wonderful. It's, freedom and a great governor. And
hopefully you'll loan him to the rest of the country for about 8 years.
I don't think so. We want him here, but
I agree with you. The best place for him is Florida. Let him run Florida and run it well as an example for everybody else of what can be done.
Exactly. We don't want to lose him, but I still go back to New York every 3 months or so, and I do my training and go out on the range and go out on the road, write traffic tickets and do details and stuff like that. So I'm still active in the police department.
Never get over it.
Can you fix traffic tickets?
Can you fix the traffic ticket?
I can, but I won't.
Well, thanks a lot.
We'll have to scrape that.
I think our time, we're close to an hour and 10 minutes here, which is just about the ceiling on these things. But God, it's been so fascinating. I'm sure we could do another hour. Maybe we'll have you back on again.
I can't believe that we just lived in a parallel life.
Yeah. But you need to read the book. You'll be amazed. You'll probably find other parallels in here that we didn't cover today.
I want to read the book while I'm drinking the whiskey.
There you go. That's the.
If you're hoping to get a free bottle, I'm sitting here right next to him. I've never seen a free bottle.
I don't care if it's
I've
free.
never seen a free bottle.
I want to taste the bourbon.
Gives it to me.
The bourbon's good. The bourbon is good. Right.
Do you have a bottle? Do you have a bottle?
We have won 7 consecutive double and triple gold medals
Don't
the
you have
world's
somebody?
whiskey.
You have a distributor in Florida,
I believe we do distribute in Florida.
so
Yeah,
you can order it.
but you can order it online. It'll come right to you.
I'm going to try the bourbon. I really want to do that. And I'll drink it and read the book. And then I won't care what the book
And
says.
think about.
And then we'll have you back for a second go at it.
Well,
You
this
got a
is
lot
fun.
of interesting stories.
It was just fun. It's just stuff that happened. It wasn't like, bragging or anything. It was just kind of like what I ended up doing. And it was all just
Pretty
because.
much how we got where we are.
That was our story.
But you got to readapt, reinvent yourself every once in a while. And who knows? Sometimes it works.
And sometimes it doesn't, especially if Hollywood's involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. Well,
Nice
I'm
meeting
going to let you go now. All right.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Great
Thank
seeing
you.
you guys.
Thank you very much.
Interesting life.
Run, run,